Hi everyone, thank you for joining us here. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and the Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and acknowledge their ongoing connection to country, culture and community. Sovereignty was never ceded. Welcome to Kerb Conversations, held as part of this evening's winter exhibition launch. We are the editorial team behind Kerb 33. Kerb is an annual student-led journal of landscape architecture based here at RMIT that explores the critical discourses shaping contemporary environments. As an editorial team, we've been reflecting on the overindulgence present in the built environment we design and a sense of undernourishment many young designers experience. This year's edition explores the theme of appetite, asking what truly sustains us as designers, what are the challenges we face, and how might we cultivate more meaningful and nourishing ways of working together.
So Kerb Conversations is part of this year's edition, showcasing how different approaches to practice can nourish both designers and communities. Our table format hopes to create an intimate setting that encourages open, collaborative dialogue between panelists and students, fostering deeper connections beyond the formality of traditional panels. We're joined tonight by two practitioners working across contrasting models of practice, each offering unique insights into how practices can respond to today's challenges, making space for both critique and care in the work that we do.
Steve Mintern is a landscape architect and a founding director of Office, a not-for-profit design practice based here in Melbourne. Office operates as a collective, intentionally positioned outside of traditional commercial models. Their work spans landscape, architecture, urban design, publishing, and activism, often foregrounding care, equity, and slow community-led approaches to spatial transformation. Gerhana Waty is an urban designer and director at Hansen Partnership, where she leads multidisciplinary projects across planning, urban design, and strategy. Her work often involves translating complex stakeholder needs into tangible urban visions, and she's a strong advocate for transparency, inclusion, and a better access to design thinking within institutional frameworks. Our first question is to the both of you. So, as emerging designers, we crave work that nourishes. Grounded in care, collaboration, and community, projects like Hansen Partnership's work on Williams Reserve and the Belfield Community Hub, or Office's proposals that challenge public housing demolition, seem to embody the spirit. In your experience, what supports or enables such nourishing design practices within our work?
You want to see this paper stone and see who goes first?
You can go first.
I'll go first. I think, firstly, thanks for having me here. And I feel like I'm a covert, adopted landscape architect because I'm not a landscape architect. What I can offer is insights and perspective through which I have engaged with a lot of landscape architects and feel there is a lot of role and actions that the landscape architects can actually undertake to inform the wicked crisis that we're in at the moment. We have climate crisis and we have housing crisis. And those are really complex matters. With regards to a practice that is supporting equity, that supports nourishing of talent, I think there needs to be a strong understanding what is collaboration, that collaboration is not an option. It is actually not also within practice. It is fundamentally, more importantly, beyond practice. It is collaboration with your clients. And clients is not just person who pay the invoice. Clients is the public. Because fundamentally with landscape architecture, a lot of the impacts of your work is public facing and it has a lot of influence in public lives. So in collaboration, I think the lens needs to be shifted from clients who pay bills and constantly attending project meetings to clients who are actually using and experiencing and paying the cost of inequity design outcomes and design decisions. So practice that supports equity and nourishing design approach that supports that outcome needs to understand that the real client is not the person who just paid the bill, is the environment, is the biodiversity context that we are in, is also the public.
Yeah, maybe to follow on for that. I think, the work that, to use your phrasing, nourishes us. All of our projects are with community, right? So we, as you mentioned, we're a charity. We can't have private clients. We don't have any. We don't want any. And so the work that we get to do with communities directly is the most important work that we do. So we do a bit of government work as well. That's not as fun, I would say. But the fact that we get to work directly with communities, whether it's the public housing residents you mentioned, in the towers, in Barrett Beacon, but also in the Ascot Vale work, or remote Aboriginal housing people that we work with as well, that's the most important stuff that we get to do by such a long way. And getting to support people in their knowledge and care for where they live and help to fight against sometimes what's happening to those people, but by importantly using those skills of design to propose an alternative solution. So it's not, don't do this, don't demolish the towers. It's here's a better way to do this that is a more equitable outcome for community ecology, as you mentioned as well. So I think that work is for us the most important part of what we get to do.
This next question is to Steve. In a previous interview, you describe Office as an experiment in reshaping how landscape architects can work ethically, and noted that being set up as a non-for-profit has allowed you to be proactively initiating projects with communities rather than wait for a client. How do you navigate the realities of small-scale practice while keeping your ethics at the centre? What have been some of the strategies or decisions that's helped Office stay resilient financially, but also creatively?
Financial resilience, I wouldn't say we have, but the other ones we've got. So I think, ultimately, as I said earlier, we've taken the decision out of our hands of whether we can do projects that are good for the world or not. We legally, as every charity in Australia, has to work for the public good. That's the clause in the ACNC legislation, so we have to do that, right? So if it's not for the public good, we're legally not allowed to do it. So if we did do a project for a developer, we would be breaking the law. We would also get fined about $200,000, which we do not have. So we took a decision very early on to make sure that we can't not do projects for the public good. The phrase the public good is pretty nebulous though. There would be ways to work around certain things and those sort of things. So we set up a structure when we set up Office, so it's managed by myself and Simon Robinson, who's an architect. And so the idea was how do we do something different? And we wanted those restrictions, right? So that's what the experiment is. It's can you make a viable practice that is not legally allowed to do any private work? It's not allowed to work for private capital because we see the reliance and the influence of private capital in the city as being the most destructive force that we have, right? So it's let's see if we can not do that. That leads into financial resilience, or however you nicely phrased it. We have to work out different ways to fund projects. So the public housing work we do, we've had exhibitions as crowdfunders to try and fund that. We get some grants and things like that. So we're registered as a cultural institution, which is a type of charity. So sometimes we get grant funding. But for the most part, it's just unpaid work. It's just throwing your time and labour, unfortunately, at something. And then we have typical client relationships. So those community orgs sometimes are just more standard clients. So we do a lot of work with Wurundjeri. They are just our client. They pay us money for services. We can work at a very discounted rate because we're a charity. But we have a range of clients that are more typical of that, client relationship as well. But it's about being really diverse with how you can make a project happen and finding out what's the most important project and approach, not who's going to pay you the most money. So it's changing that around, which being a not-for-profit allows us to do. It just changes the way you think about your relationship to these things.
Cool. Thanks. Who's next?
Would you say that's working?
Jesus Christ, not today. Is it working? we talk about it as an experiment. We do really believe that, and we don't know if it's a successful one yet. We'll let you know.
Yeah.
And then, like, the thing is, you constantly shift your goalpost to what successful is. So it's like, now it's like we're getting our first few, like, built typical architecture, landscape architecture projects, and it's like, oh, that's the thing that we should have. But then it's like, oh, we decided to start a gallery for some reason. It's like, okay, well, why? So it's like there's always another thing to try and do and expand and test the limits of what's feasible. So you'd probably have to ask someone else if it's successful.
Cool. I guess in contrast to that, working at a more commercial scale, Gerhana, that Hansen does, this much larger multidisciplinary practice, it must bring its own set of constraints, but also opportunities. So in your work at Hansen, how do these realities shape the projects you're able to pursue, and hence the impact they have on habitats, communities, and landscape?
I think as a commercial practice, which is fundamentally most practices out there is a role that we play with regards to supporting the industry, providing employment. But what I think is important, at least in our practice, is that when we go for a job, there's always a filtering process that we go through. And multidisciplinary is such a overused words that not very well practiced. There is a lot of firms out there which has multiple sectors, but it doesn't mean they're integrated. And integrating something, we have been in practice for 30 years. I myself have been in practice almost 20 years. And 18 of those years have been in multidisciplinary firms. But where it's truly, the magic really happens is where no one can discern. This is work by Gerhana, and this is work by Jane, who is a planner. That's really the beauty where true integrated things come together. That's rare. And where we pitch for work, we really try to think, is Hansen's position in a commercial practice one that has to be fundamentally profitable for the shareholders' benefits, but also because we work in it, does this bring us joy? Does it make our brain ticks? Does it put fire in our belly in answering all of these really challenging puzzles questions? If the answer is yes, we'll go for it. If the project budget doesn't give us all the luxury to think for months on end, because project's budget never increases, it's always like this. Inflation goes up, salary goes up, hourly rates goes up, but project budget never budges. Where is the gift, right? The gift is not in the thinking. The gift in the production, the manual work of production. There is time, cost, and quality. You don't compromise on quality. You don't compromise on cost because the client is not going to compromise on cost. So where do you compromise? Time. So as the next generation of designers, landscape architects, ask yourself, what's the role of technology in my work? How can I expedite my design process, iterating my design process, testing the feasibility of my options in technology? So don't take status quo as it is. Multidisciplinary is a fad. Throw that words out. Integrated is the outcome that you want, right? And I think just accept it's going to be messy. It's never linear. It's always like that. And that's the beauty of it. Just be open-minded. Ask the right questions. And asking the right questions, really, in the age of AI, is where the money is. Thinking. So, commercial practice, where we squeeze the juice out of that, is in technology and workflow efficiency, not in the thinking, not in the quality.
Cool.
This is a question for both of you, and it sort of speaks to a form of integration. We often find ourselves caught between the values cultivated in the theoretical ideas of academia and academic teaching, and the realities of practice that's within a profit-driven structure. I guess, like, to what you're saying there about integration, is there anything that you guys would encourage us to focus on as students to sort of integrate some of those values from academia to practice?
You go first, sister.
I think that, the question raises an interesting point, which is this idea that everyone in practice, well, people in practice tend to complain that grads come out and they don't know how to do a footing detail or something.
Totally.
I disagree fundamentally that that's useful to know when you come out of practice. I can teach you how to dock a footing. I can't teach you how to think creatively and give a shit. Like that, I
Yes.
can't do. I don't have time. Like, that's what a degree is for. That's what 5 years of your life's for. So I think that the issue there is not that students come out with a lack of technical skills. It's that you come out into practice that completely lacks vision and ambition and works for developers who are predominantly greedy assholes. And I think that you come out and then you work for 5 to 10 years and then you're like, maybe you then go start your own practice. And then you start doing the same thing again and we perpetuate the same thing. So I think that absolutely it would be great if, you know, you could learn everything. You could learn to create, think creatively, come out as well as being amazing at Revit. That would be great. But that's not, you've got an amount of time to learn a certain amount of skills, right? And I much prefer you to come out being able to think creatively, critically about the world and give a shit than being able to know how to, you know, draw the detail in the right way. I think practices need to be more creative and think more interestingly and be more ambitious about the work they do and not wait for a brief to come to them to respond to that. I think that that is what gets us in the situation we're in now within the profession, but also within the broader world as well. So I think that, yeah, I would have a different view to maybe the way in which that might be framed. But Gerhana might have a completely different view.
I think for me, transitioning from university frame of mind to practice, one thing that I always find highly useful is being able to speak multiple technical languages. And this is because increasingly, like I said, everything is now collaborative, right? These complex matters that we're facing now does not and cannot be addressed by single practitioners. There's not one architect that can sit at the corner out there and design this masterpiece of solution that gives everyone all the answers to the problems. So being able to talk in a simple language, no bullshit, no jargons and no rhetoric and abstract thoughts that no one can follow what you're on about, that is fundamental. Even in your final presentation at uni, being able to communicate ideas clearly, simply, logically, doesn't diminish your creativity, because creativity is not the way you communicate, it's your thinking, right? That is a skill that will take you very, very far. Not only you will talk to your tutors or people who grades you, but this is also community members who are probably against the whole idea of change, right? And being able to influence people, decision makers, community members, people who are not the same people who are technically trained like you, are super important. Being able to talk the same language to the engineers. Simple things like schematic design means different things to architects, to landscape architects, to engineers. The level of resolution is different. The level of expectation information that's required is different. Being empathetic designers and being empathetic technician, it is gold. So I think it's not rocket science. It's just being able to really understand what you're doing, what you're on about, being authentic, and use language that's simple. I don't know why it's so hard. Why is it so hard? It's easy to complicate.
Clarity and complexity
Yes.
aren't, you know, mutually exclusive
Yeah,
things. It's
they
like
are.
you need to get better at, people need to get better at communicating
And
things,
synthesizing.
complex ideas with a level
Yes.
of clarity, for sure.
So maybe a follow-up question to what you were saying, Steve. If a student finds himself in a situation where they are maybe in one of the firms that you described,
Sorry, not
The
the
devil.
Sincere
They have a
apologies,
role to
everybody.
play too.
what sort of, is there anything specifically like a technique or anything like that that you could suggest for a student who sort of wants to challenge that structure a little bit? Because I think you were sort of saying that putting a bit of the work onto the firms to be creative, but maybe for a student, how could they sort of challenge that structure?
Yeah, and I mean, like, when I was a student, I remodeled the same square for Lendlease for 2 years. Like, it was soul destroying shit. Like, don't get me wrong, I've done this stuff, right? Like, it was awful, and that is why I don't do it anymore. So I appreciate it's very necessary. I also appreciate right now it's very hard to find a gig. Get the gig you need to pay your rent. Like, absolutely. But I think there is a way to maybe, the thing that you have is your labour, right? That's all that we have, right? You can withdraw your labour. That is what you can do. That's a pretty big move. I think that you can politely ask to not work on projects that you find particularly ethically challenging, and I think you can do that in a polite way. You might get told to get stuff and just do the drawing, don't know, but I think that it is something at least to raise, because a lot of people are autopiloting through and maybe aren't thinking critically about maybe this isn't a great thing for the world. A lot of people at your practice probably are thinking, this is shit, we shouldn't be doing this, but they don't make that decision either. So I think that, you're in a precarious situation, right? If you're a grad, you're the most expendable person. Like, that sucks, but that's the reality. So I definitely appreciate that you've got to pay your rent and do what you've got to do. But I think there's ways to raise that maybe this project isn't, like, why are we doing this project? How are we, what's this for? Like, how does this meet the ethics that we put out on Instagram about what we are as a practice and all that sort of stuff? I think there's ways to do that without getting fired. I would strongly suggest not getting fired. Yeah, it's a bad thing.
Can I just add to that? I think another thing that will be really useful transitioning from academia to practice. Busy yourself in informing yourself about what's going on out there. Planning is freaking boring, right? Boring, but excuse me, you are within that framework. That's your ecosystem. Boring or not, it's irrelevant. But please be interested, because if you really want to do meaningful things that is ethical, that is nourishing, you have to understand the system you're playing in. Then you can influence it. 2, don't expect as a student to go from 0 to 100. Collect dots as you go. Collect knowledge, collect skills. Anywhere you go, have a growth mindset, please. Whether you work for Lendlease, whether you work for whoever,
Don't work for Lendlease.
there is something else. There is something you can learn. Learn their financial system, learn their business model, then hack it. Don't take anything as a status quo and therefore this is Bible. Learn, understand why it is like that. Why is there the option? And then you can modify it. Because I think modification without understanding why is just not going to work. It's not going to last.
I think on that as well, similar to what I was saying earlier, you come out with a certain set of skills. You do not have all the skills. None of us do. So I think it's about learning those things when you can be the most helpful and useful to those communities that maybe you care about. You have a specific thing that you want to help out, do, work with, all those sort of things. There is, no matter where you are working, you are going to learn an enormous amount through doing that. And there's a real value in that. And so it's you can't graduate and start doing, the project that you designed in your major project, that's not possible, unfortunately. So you do have to go out and collect those skills and understand how the system works and how projects get done as well.
Griff and I recently, for the new edition of Kerb, interviewed Peggy Deemer, a lecturer at Yale, and she speaks about the architectural education system being too focused on just architecture education, and stresses the importance of a well-rounded, historical knowledge, social, cultural, financial. Do you think that those aspects of, do you think that the architectural education system needs to be more well-rounded and bring in different aspects of different...
100%. Imagine if you need to change your design solution for public benefits, but it requires certain budget. It requires certain complexity and resolution through technical solutions. How do you communicate it? You can't communicate because it's nice and it looks good and everyone will be happy about it. Developer will be like, no, thank you. So I think being understanding to what motivates them and finding ways of how you can work within that. It sounds very manipulative, but it's not. I'm like, the thing is, I'm an Asian woman, and that's something that we have to operate within, stealth mode. We operate in stealth mode because confronting openly is not something that we do, right? It's not in our culture, it's not in our practice, it's not we do. So how do we gain agency? Stealth mode. It doesn't mean you have no power. You just do not have to declare it up front. I'm coming your way with this hammer. Insert it in your work program, insert it in your workflow, insert it in your deliverable. It may not be in the project scope, but go above and beyond. Nothing's stopping you.
I think understanding like all the things that are decided before you get a brief. It's like if you can work up, so there's politics, budgets, technically is it possible? Like there's all of these things that happen before you even get given a brief in a practice, right? So it's like the project's kind of like 95% there, right? So if you can understand more holistically how things happen within the city, then you're going to have more chance that you can implement, engage with that system higher up that chain. We're not waiting for someone to say, hey, can you design this plaza for us? Here's what it is, what it needs to do and everything. It's like, well, you can go up a few chains and start to think about how to be active within your community and whatever way that manifests. You need to understand how the system works and whether that's engaging with politics and economics and these sort of things. By understanding that, you've got more chance of having agency. And I think that's like the thing that most people get despondent about when they start working in practice is the lack of agency. You went from doing a major project where you have ultimate agency, you can design whatever you want, no restrictions, it's all about ideas, to them being like, you have no agency, draw this, right? So it's like, that is a bit of a shock to the system. So I think it's about understanding how you can build that agency back up through your practice.
Amazing. Well, just before we wrap up with our final question, did you guys have any questions you wanted to ask each other, maybe?
You go first. Seems like you do have a question.
Well, only that I think like you were talking about when projects really work, particularly within like a big practice that has lots of disciplines, is when they actually work together. Do you want to talk? Do you have an example of that, which I think would be great for maybe the students?
It's a headache. It's keeping me awake at the moment. So we're currently working with the city of Port Phillip to implement their housing strategy. And for those who are not familiar with Port Phillip context, it's basically Middle Park, Albert Park, St Kilda, Elwood, Balaclava. Okay, really expensive houses, very affluent areas, fine-grained subdivision pattern. 150 square meter, 250 square meters. And the fundamental outcome is basically, this is a housing strategy that says, this is the residential zoning, this is the scale, this is the housing target. Can you please prepare the zoning regimes for that? But because we are integrated practice, and someone like me will say, hang on, the policy or the controls, the built form controls cannot just randomly spit out dimensions and guidance that will result in, one, unfeasible outcomes, two, things that don't address flooding or climate change, things that don't really manage. I mean, heritage is important in Port Phillip, but how do you balance growth and retention of heritage fabric? There needs to be really detailed, almost architectural response and design response to site planning that can only be addressed if you really know how things are put together. But also at the same time, how that translates back to policy. Does it make sense? It's like, it's design policy at the same time, and it oscillates back and forth, back and forth. In our minds, it's so clear. Okay, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. But when it comes to freaking reporting, English is not my first language, writing is not my hobby. So when the Kerb guys come to me like, can you write an article? I'm like, can I not? Please, don't make me do it. You will not get anything out of me that is substantial. Just make me talk. I'll be a lot more entertaining. But that is fundamentally where the oscillation between what needs to happen at clause 15 of the Port Phillip planning scheme that translate to, all right, the design outcome is going to be like this, needs that really complex thinking, right? And what happened to landscape? Those who knows what happened to the codification process currently that's being implemented by the state government, you should be very worried. There is no regard to landscape anymore. Why is no one outraged about this, right? That the sustainability factor is being codified and measured through canopy cover. And having two canopy overlaps with each other, which is better for biodiversity outcome and corridor, is actually a penalty to developers because they are actually being penalized. There is no concern about understory planting I'm not landscape architect, and this is me asking the basic question. What about permeability? Hang on, so the Glenara guys upstream can reduce site permeability to meet their housing capacity, which means all of the floodwater will come down to Port Phillip, who is already inundated. Is anyone looking into this holistically? Does the government actually have any platform where they can test policy live as thought bubbles pop in their head? It's all ideas, good ideas, but please, what does it actually mean? And I think this is where everyone here has a role to play with regards to actually making it tangible. What does it mean? Question I maybe flick back to you is, what is the role of designers, and I'll put the planners in this bucket, in influencing the public and the industry in supporting good design outcome? What I mean by that is, are we talking in our own echo chamber?
Yes. Would be the first answer. Well, I think what we can do and what we should do, which I don't think we currently do, is actually engaging with those things and providing people with the ability to understand an alternative future, right? So it's like, what is this? What could this look like? It's the world's fucked in every possible way, right? So it's like our job then, what we can do is provide an alternative to say, if we did this, this would happen instead. This is an alternative vision for what we can do. And I don't think we do that because we wait to be asked to do things. And no one with any money is going to ask you to do that, because why would they? Because they want you to make them more money, right? That's how capital works. Every project you work on, it's about extracting wealth from that bit of land and from you as a person. That's how capitalism is, fundamentally. So I think that what we need to do is be more active in engaging with the world and going out to that. So going out to community, going out to the media, going to petition Parliament, whatever way it is that you need to do this, and not talk to the same people who have 100%. The same profession, the same background, went to the same school, all of that sort of stuff. So I think there's a real role in being a more diverse set of people that we speak to in every way. So profession-wise, but also, you know, socioeconomically, you know, who are the people that are actually going to live in these places that we're designing, and what are the effects they're going to have? And I think that as an industry, as a built environment professions, let's say, we're really, really bad at that. And a lot of professions are very bad at that. But I think that if we want to have the agency that we think we deserve as landscape architects, we need to get better at that very, very quickly. Otherwise, we will not be here to keep doing this. Exactly. And I think that's a very important thing. Sorry to get very dramatic.
No, it's so true. I feel like the way I ask the question is also very dramatic. Like, do you think? I think the reason why I ask is, I had a conversation with Albert No, I don't know those who knows him, who is the architect of AMO Architecture, and he reminds me, Gerhana, remember, architecture, true architecture, serve only 1% of the population, right? The practice serve more than 1% of the population. There is a lot of frustrated designers who, like you said, coming out of uni with all these ideals like, yes, I can do goods, and then suddenly they're like, bam. If the 1% is delivering design excellence, who is influencing the 99%? If the state government is releasing a document that says good medium density design guidelines, in it are all examples of architecture practices who are great, but I don't see them being realized in the city of Willesee, in the city of Casey, in the city of Wyndham, where construction costs are probably, what, 3,000 per square meter? Not 10,000 per square meter. So what does good design look like for 3,000 per square meter? Does it mean they're not unethical? Does it mean they're not good design outcome? This is what I'm saying. Equity is not just, there is equity, and then there is design outcome that everyone has in their head. That is breathe architecture. That is 6 degrees. There's Kennedy Nolan. Great, right? Can those poor folks at Whittlesea afford it? So please, somebody at the state government with the intelligence that they have and the excellence that they have, tell me, what does good design look like at 3,000 per square meter? Then we talk about equity. Otherwise, we are again talking in the same echo chamber. Business as usual, BAU.
Amazing. Well, I think before we open it up to the audience, we're just going to lighten up the mood a little bit.
So passionate.
So, as you know, our theme is appetite, and we like to ask everyone who we interview, what's just like a favourite meal to share? Do you guys have one? Yeah?
This wasn't on the list you sent.
Yeah, it wasn't on the list.
It wasn't.
I was prepared for
Surprise.
transparency.
Transparency on paper.
Oh, wait, I've got to. Yeah,
You gotta
it's
answer.
vaguely related. Yeah. So we do a project. We work on a project called Wiyajanta, which is like a remote Aboriginal housing project. It's amazing. It's great. Just check out the work that they do, not the stuff we do. They do. But we had a community event up there, and in order to feed the community event, we had to locate 32 kangaroo tails and 46 kilos of sausages, and I think about 24 bush turkeys. None of which tasted good, by the way. But that was definitely our favourite meal to share. There was probably 250 people there in Tennant Creek, all at the Arts Centre, talking about how we could improve people's lives through housing and eating food that was fine. But it was a very, very beautiful experience.
Where did you find that many kangaroo tails?
We didn't do that. That's not white boy business. That's they went and found, the community goes and finds those, and they all turned up. It was great.
Not my favorite meal, but I've used it a lot. Pies.
Oh, love a pie.
Love pies, right?
Yeah.
Because they're always good attractor for community engagement. You buy feedback and insights with pies. And I'm like, that is the cheapest information gathering exercise I've ever done. So it always works. People always turn up. And what's beautiful about pie is that it is so accessible that it doesn't always attract the same community members who are always active in engagement. It attracts younger people, which are very hard to get when you're doing community engagement, because they either are not informed or not aware, or things that they don't have a role or agency. So I think in a lot of our work with engagement, we try to cut through the same noisy crew that always say the same thing, no car park, no change in my neighborhood. We always address the next generation down, because we said this plan affect them. Their opinion matter more. So, pies. I don't like it personally, but.
I don't like kangaroo tail either.
You guys, didn't really, truthfully, but you know what? So now we can open it up to the audience if you guys have any questions for what was discussed tonight. Don't be shy. Or do.
Oh, no question.
Oh.
Bummed everyone out too much.
I really enjoy when the conversations that are going towards like the agency of the students in entering the sort of workforce after they've finished studying, and I feel like universities are a great place to kind of build culture and kind of be a little bit crazy, but then often students kind of get a bit, I don't know, pushed back down when they enter into reality. But I wonder, both speakers, like at what point or to what extent in your kind of working career you felt very inspired by or influenced by the freshness of students and their ideas, and to what extent that can actually influence the practice. Just a bit of a like positive.
I think if I can go back to technology, I think this almost naive courage and fearlessness, sometimes that come from recent grads, from naivety, not understanding the reality perhaps, but being able to ask the questions, why not, can we do it differently, is always refreshing, especially for someone who's been in industry for a while. Or asking a very basic question like, why is it like that? right? Why is the control like that? Why does the codification process doesn't care about landscape? Why? Because that is a question that no one else asks anymore. Because I think once you're jaded in the industry, you just take it and you just work within it and you squeeze what you can out of that lemon, right? But if you can bring that continued fearless behavior, to me that's super refreshing and inspiring. And being able to use tech, because you guys are really at the forefront of it, really put practice into a place of opportunity about reviewing what their workflow looks like. With a renew workflow, you can unlock different answers to the questions. And that to me is not a silver bullet. It's not something that you bring and then here you go, I've unlocked everything else that is problematic in practice, but really it is incremental, whether it is technical skills through technology, whether it is really the fresh eyes look at the world and asking the question. And that to me is invaluable.
Yeah. So we have a program thing called Ampersand, which allows people to use our not-for-profit charity status, and they get a desk and they get to basically use this as a front to do their own projects, right? So I think like the people who come through and are doing work through that, amazing. So Therese Abel just did an exhibition at our gallery, which was really incredible, looking at feminist principles for housing, and just had a really amazing program through that, which is incredible. There's some people at the moment looking at studying a new architecture magazine focused on review. So we're very, very lucky that we constantly get people coming through and applying and doing things, and it is invigorating the level of energy that people come in with. Often when Simon and I are very, very tired. So we're very lucky that we have that avenue. So not only like teaching, which is obviously also a very similar thing, but then also for people to come through and say, I want to do this project, like I care about this thing, like how can you help me to do this thing, is always a pretty great conversation to have. And similarly, like the gallery with 3553, we just had all the EOIs. There's plenty of grads and students who are like, hey, I want to run this workshop, I want to put this event on, I want to have this exhibition. So we're very privileged that we constantly get that, which is very, very nice.
I suppose, it's a big price to both. Talking more about your individual practices, what are your guys' appetite? Like, what are you both really hungry for to see, whether that be change in the industry? What do you want to see more into the industry strengthened? What sort of bring you to the curb? What are your guys'?
Is this like a wish list? What is my wish list? I told Yazid this. Thanks, Yazid. I'm going to bring you into this. Please bring back the double degree program. The Bachelor of Planning and Bachelor of Landscape Architecture. They produce the best people who are currently making in-ground changes to the system, because they have that unique ability to understand spatial and understand policy positioning. Because design outcome is one solution, but a lot of solution you need to realize is also non-design. There is policy things that has powerful influence in downstream. So get a seat at the table in where those policy and strategies are created. Have a voice, have an agency, because it will fall down back to you. When Steve talks about don't wait for a brief to come, that's it. Talk to the right people who are in position of power, influence them to think the way they should think, what is good. You may not be able to influence them 100% and convert them into completely someone else, but if you can only plant one seed, take that as a win. I call this the anti-hero movement, right? A lot of the work that is actually translate to good design and meaningful public benefit outcome are not heroic projects. They're not. So beautiful render, shiny little buildings, or award-winning, whatever. Sure, but there's also a role that we can play that is much more about planting small seeds everywhere else, influencing the mom and dad developers. What is good design outcome? Because they represent a lot of development outcomes. If we antagonize them, what does that mean? I mean, they will continue doing what they're doing. So whose job is it then to influence them? Someone else's? That's a bit irresponsible. So I think be fearless about talking to the non-converts. That is harder than talking to the converts, which also means you better know what you're doing. Isn't it positive?
Do you mean like wish for like what the profession would do, or what for our work, or?
Yeah, so your personal, what you're really wanting to see be brought into landscape architecture as a whole, what change you want to see, even what is being present, what's been happening, and you want to see brought to the forefront of how.
Yeah. Maybe because I can see the Tula post there, and because you mentioned Peggy earlier, I think that the work that Tula does, Trade Unions of Landscape Architecture, is really important. I think that the work that Peggy does is obviously incredible. So Peggy Deemer, who I'm sure most of you know. I think that the support of that union movement and solidarity across our sector is really, really important. And I think that getting rid of unpaid overtime, exploited work practices, all of these sort of things. We're currently working with Tula to try and fight for an industry award. You currently can get paid minimum wage, which is insane because you've got an enormous HECS debt you've got to pay off. So I would like to see, and we look forward to seeing, more agency through the union movement and solidarity across landscape architectural workers, but also built environment workers. Like this argument that we have with like the architects and the planners and everyone is insane. Like you're all like built environment workers who are all getting, can't think we've got a word than fucked over, but fucked over by the system here. So I think that the work that Tula does is really, really incredible, and I highly recommend you checking them out. I'm sure the interview you did with them is amazing. And so I think that's something I'm really excited about. Continuing to help them out where we can.
Thank you.
Sort of I guess a comment and maybe a question as well. I was really sort of intrigued to hear about the port fillet plan, kind of from the perspective of like someone who's working on it. I live in Glenara, and I know a lot of people who are very invested in what's happening with that whole system. You know, like biodiversity area, what's happening with the waterways. And you said like, who's like concerned about this? Where are they? I know there's full-on community groups and people on the ground that are really, really, headed off about this and really concerned about it. So I guess the question would be, how do you sort of, because I feel like there's kind of some like communication there that what people on the ground want somehow isn't getting through to, you guys that are working on the project, like the council's kind of doing as far as I sort of see, and they're just ignoring, you and non people out there. And, so what is there a better way to kind of get a better outcome for people on the ground who are really concerned about these issues?
I think that's a really good point, because community members are literally site scouts, right? You know the site really well, how the place ticks. And those are why community engagement are truly being prepared for, because it's to mine those mines. What's happening at the moment, I think, the government is minding themselves with a very technical approach. And they put the banner of evidence-based process in justifying a lot of their decision making. I know Melbourne Water is currently mapping their flood level, updated flood level, and there are 3 trenches or 3 waves of how that information and mapping needs to be prepared. Their assumption, their process is very opaque at the moment. And not just that, the moment the flooding map is done, what does it mean for someone who is developing a land in Glenara? It's also unclear. Okay, there is a flood map. The new flood level now is 1 meter. Okay, what does it mean? Do I have to ramp up 1 meter high? So that's where the breakdown also happens. So yes, information can come down from community members that says these are some of the issues and some of the ideas that may work for this particular place. That information typically go back to council. At the moment, council hasn't been given the agency to feed it back to state government. And where I think the disconnect happens is exactly what I said in portfolio. There's policy, there is guidelines, and there is no real testing. What does it mean in tangible sense? So it doesn't go back to the community members with regards to this is what it means for you guys. This is what it means for someone who wants to develop. This is what it means for someone who is next door to someone who's being developed. I think the disconnect really is about policy stops at policy. Community stays at very grassroots level. And there's not enough tangible testing that happen in between to actually make sure the two talks to each other. So I can proudly say that our practice tries to cut through that crap, but unfortunately, not every practice has that luxury or privilege to do that.
I'm totally talk to you.
Okay.
There's groups on the ground that came,
Yeah. Yeah. Good question, though. Should we run on?
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you guys. That was such a great discussion. I think we all got a lot out of it. And it's been a privilege to hear about your values and realities that's shaping your sort of different ways of working. And then on behalf of the Kerb Editorial Team and the RMIT Landscape Architecture Program, we'd like to extend our thanks to everyone who joined us this evening. It's been an absolute delight. Thanks for being part of the conversation, and get excited for the new edition coming soon. And I think it touched on a lot of great points that were discussed tonight. And also, please feel free, we have this table with some paper on it. Come and draw some things on it, make it super messy and beautiful. And if you don't know what to draw your favorite meal if you can. Something random, something appetite. But
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Passionate there.
I like it.